So I grew up loving television. I still love television. People ask me all the time, like, what's your hobby? And they don't believe me when I say watching TV and watching movies. It's my favorite thing to do. So when I was a kid, I watched a lot of TV. Now, I've shared this with you before. I grew up in what some consider to be the dark ages of the 1900s, before we had pausing live TV. Before we had on-demand everything and streaming services, you would have to, if you're like 25 and under, you need to hear this, how hard we had it. We would have to watch the shows we wanted to watch at a particular time. Like, it was on Mondays at 7 p.m., and if you weren't around on Monday at 7 p.m., you weren't watching the show. And then even worse is, while you were watching the show, they forced you to watch commercials. You couldn't skip them. There was no little button that came up in the bottom. You had to watch them. And the people that made these commercials were so smart and so genius, because they would attach songs to the commercials. They give everything a jingle. So even if you had nothing to do with that product, you had no interest in that product, you could recite their jingle. You knew something about it, and you'd walk around whistling it and humming it, and people would be like, what song is that? And you're like, I don't even know where that came from, but it's in my head. And one of those for me was a product that I have never used nor ever will use, because it's makeup. Maybellene. You remember Maybellene? Here's how the jingle went. Maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's Maybellene. You all know it. You all know it, because it's a catchy little tune. But I love that line. I think part of the reason it stuck with me is because it applies to so many different areas of our life. But here's what I think is so funny about Maybellene. I'm gonna wreck this for you. I think I know how they came up with the name. Because if you read it a little bit different, it could say, maybe lion. You're gonna be in Target laughing this week when you're in the makeup section. Like, maybe she's born with it, or maybe they're lying. Like, the question, right, is like, is this person this beautiful? And this is horrid, I know. Like, there's some ad stuff that's done some real bad harm to people, but like, maybe she's born that way, or maybe she put on makeup. And I think that question is so important, because for me, as a follower of Jesus, as a Christian, and I know not everybody in here is at that point in their life, and that's totally okay. I'm just gonna tell you the truth about me for a little bit. As a Christian, I've been hoping that I was born with it. I've been hoping that I would just become better. I've been hoping that I would just become more like Jesus magically. That in some ways, this sounds ridiculous, but it's true. I remember sitting and being like, okay, God, hit me with it. Like, I said the prayer, so, right? Like, you heard in church that if you follow Jesus, you are a new creation. You become a new person. The old is gone, the new has come. All of those things that you've heard, if you've been in church more than once, you've heard them. And you're like, but I don't feel like a new creation. I don't feel like a new person. In fact, I still like a lot of the things I used to like, and I do a lot of things that I used to do. And the reality is, it's because you aren't born with it, and it doesn't just happen. Like makeup, you have to put in some effort. I remember the first time I watched somebody like get ready in the morning. It was a whole thing. I'm a guy. I get up, I'm like, looks pretty good, stuff in the hair, and here we go, right? Like, there's just no process to it, but it's a decision. It's a thing that happens every single day, right? And when it comes to following Jesus, and this may wreck the whole thing for you, and you may decide today, I don't really want to follow Jesus if that's what this is. I just would rather you know what you're getting yourself into. Following Jesus does not just happen. It, in the same way, it requires a decision and some discipline on you to get closer and closer. For instance, my favorite sentence in the whole Bible is what Christians will call the fruit of the Spirit, because it lists out, like, this is what should be true. I like knowing, how do I get a good grade? So it lists out love, joy, peace, patience. So in my mind, it doesn't work this way, but in my mind, I can go, all right, I'm relatively loving and joyful and faithful and all these things, so I'm a good Christian, right? But God has never just gone, okay, boom, you are those things. I wasn't just born with it. And it's funny, right, that we will say I was born again. If you went to kind of an old school church when you were a kid, people would say, well, I was born again this time. And then sometimes they'd be like, I was born again, and then I'm born again, because we just want to be absolutely sure, right? But I was born again. But you're not just born different. I was not born all of a sudden loving. I was not born all of a sudden joyful. There's things that I've learned I have to do. And so part of what I want to do for the next little bit is maybe save you some heartache and some frustration. Because my guess is you've done some of the things that I've done, or you're thinking you need to do some of the things that I've done. But a lot of you have walked away from church. This is your first time back in a long time, or maybe even your first time ever, and you've avoided church because it doesn't seem to make any real difference in anybody's life. You maybe felt like, I've been doing this for a while, and I don't feel one iota different than when I started. Or you went to church with people where you're like, they put on a really good show on Sunday, and then I meet them Tuesday, and it's a different person. They're not actually changing, they're just putting on really good makeup. And what happens is we as people go, okay, I'm frustrated, it's not happening, so maybe it'll start on Monday, kind of like a good diet, right? I eat a whole pizza today, I'm like, well, the diet starts Monday until Tuesday, and then I'm like, well, the diet will start next Monday, and we keep putting it off. And it's the same thing as rolling dice and hoping that it just works out, hoping that it just happens. It's like a giant game of roulette. We're just spinning the thing, and hopefully it lands on the right number and the right color so that we can get what we were hoping for out of it. It's like we're playing chance in some ways with who we want to be. Because again, we have a tendency to sit back and go, just hit me with it, God. Just make it happen. After all, in the sentence that I love, fruit of the Spirit, it's not the fruit of Josh, it's the fruit of God. So I'm kind of like, God, you're on the hook for this. You've got to make this happen in me because I don't have it in me. And then I come to some letters that Paul wrote. One of them is called Philippians, and it's the reason we call it Philippians, by the way, is because it was written to a bunch of Jesus followers in a town called Philippi. So if you live in a town, they'll usually put an IAN at the end of it, and that's like your thing. So the Philippians are the people that live in Philippi. And most Christians and Bible scholars refer to Philippians as the happiest book in the Bible. And sometimes I go, what Philippians are they reading? Because there are moments where it feels like Paul just gets so in my yard and in my face about the things that seem just natural humanity to me that it's a little unsettling. So I thought it would be fun for us to all read one of those together today. This is what Paul says in Philippians. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. And some of us go, well, that's not even Christianity. That's just basic humanity. Like a good human is not selfish and they don't constantly try and impress others. In fact, we will raise our kids to not be selfish and to not, always be putting on a show and all those kinds of things. So at the core, we agree with it, but it's really difficult to live with it because society rewards it. I don't know for sure what it was like in the first century for Paul, but in the 21st century for you and I, selfishness and impressing others is actually like a virtue in a lot of ways. I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but social media is fueled by selfishness and impressing others. Like, you go on social media to find out all the ways that you're not good. Because everybody else on there is spending their time telling you how good they are. So you can't make what they make. You can't bake what they bake. You can't live where they live. You can't go on the vacation that they go on. Over and over again, people are bragging. And you might go, well, this can't be that prevalent. Just so you know, 75% of the United States of America is active on social media. The number would be crazy higher if we were saying the number of people that have social media accounts. 75% are the people that on a regular basis are scrolling and watching, posting, liking, sharing, all of those kinds of things. Which means 3 out of 4 of your friends spend a significant amount of time going online, and they don't know this and they would never say this, but they're going on there to try and impress you and make it about them. And here's why I say this. Of the 75% of people that post and are active on social media, 35% of all posts are selfies. Think about this. Almost 4 out of 10 posts are the picture of the person posting it, like you've never seen them before. So they don't document their vacation, they document them on vacation. They don't show you what they're experiencing, they show you them experiencing it. This is why people walk around like this all day, every day, because they need to be at the center of the picture. They need to be at the center of attention. And listen, if you're a selfie taker, there's no shame. I do it too. But I want us to be aware of what's at play and what's at stake with this. Because the approval of others around ourselves is what's fueling us more often than not. And the way we get their approval is we try to impress them. Look at where I'm at, look at what I'm doing, see who I'm with, all of those kinds of things. The validation is what fuels social media and what fuels us. I know you don't wake up in the morning going, today I'm gonna impress a bunch of people. At least not consciously. I know you don't wake up, because I don't wake up in the morning going, today I'm gonna be selfish. It just kind of happens. That I am born with. That I do without thinking. One of my favorite quotes from a movie of all time is actually from a movie I've never seen, to tell you the truth. But I love this line so much. It's from Cece Bloom from the movie Beaches. This is what she says. But enough about me. Let's talk about you. What do you think of me? This is just kind of wired into our DNA, unfortunately. Right? Like, again, we're not doing it the way she did it, where we would say it out loud. But we care a great deal what other people think. And when we're not thinking about us, we want to know what they're thinking about us. And you've experienced this. You've been out to lunch or coffee or dinner with friends, and you get done with your entire meal before they've taken their first bite because they're just talking so much. And they're telling you about everything going on in their life, all the ups and all the downs and all the wins and all the losses and just all the things. And your dinner is a lot like social media, because social media is like, here's what I had for breakfast, and here's how many times I went to the bathroom today, and here's my routine in the morning for winning, and all these kinds of things, right? We know what this is like because we're surrounded by it all of the time. And the truth is, and if you're not a Jesus follower, you'll appreciate this. Even though we call ourselves Jesus followers, Christians are no better at this than anybody else, which is why Paul had to write something about it. That's why Paul had to address it, because we continue to try and make everything about us all the time. And so Paul starts with, hey, don't be selfish and don't try to impress others. And there is a relationship between those two. Right? Impressing others is not for their benefit, it's for your benefit. That's why we do it, which is selfishness, right? And so Paul then starts to kind of unravel this a little bit and just gets a little more intense. And this is the part that I always get weirded out by. He says, be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. Now, I want to make sure you're not reading into what Paul's saying, because I did at first too. Paul is not saying you should have zero self-interest. He's not saying you should have zero self-worth, right? The invitation to follow Jesus is not that you've got to become this like worthless, self-deprecating, beat yourself up, I'm not good at anything baloney. Like that's not what Paul's saying at all. But what he is saying is that you should look at other people as better than yourselves. Problem number one. And then he says, and you should take an interest in others. Like, You should kind of be fascinated by them and want to know something about them and learn more about them and be around them a little bit more. And this is the part where you go, I thought being a Christian, I thought following Jesus was like going to church. I thought following Jesus was like I read my Bible periodically, or I'm in a Bible study. I thought following Jesus was like agreeing with a bunch of kind of doctrines or whatever. And I think Paul will go, yeah, that's part of it. But way more of it happens outside of here. Way more of it happens in the context of your relationships and the people that are around you. And as a Jesus follower, you should take an interest in them. And we've talked about first week, we said, humility is understanding who you are in light of who he is. And Paul takes it one step further and goes, okay, and as you start to understand that, you're going to realize that you also will understand who you are in light of who they are, the people around you. To oversimplify it, Paul might say, you should use the outward-facing camera on your phone a little more than you use the inward-facing camera. If you realize this, there are photographers that are out of a job because the technology that's packed into that outward, the camera that's on the back of your phone is so powerful and so amazing that you can take professional level pictures now with your phone. But most of us never use it. We use the other one that's inferior to the outside one. We use the one that faces us, that's lower pixels and lower all the things, because that's where our attention goes most often. And Paul would say, listen, if you're gonna be serious about following Jesus, you have to turn that around. You have to become more interested in them than you are in you. In some ways, Paul's arguing, you have to become more impressed with them and less spending time impressing them. And again, this is the part where we go, okay, this is way more than I bargained for. This is way more difficult than just going to church. This means fundamentally changing the way I see other people. This means fundamentally changing the way I see myself. And we go, Paul, you're asking a lot. And Paul's response would be, am I? Because we say we're following Jesus. So let's just take a minute and think about Jesus and the interest he took in you and in me. This is what he says next. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. And we looked at this a little bit last week, but I wanted to come back to it because I think it's so important and powerful. He says, though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. And then Paul wraps this idea up with, when he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross. Jesus, this was said last week, the way of the cross is the way of humility. Jesus is our example of what it means to be humble. And the humility that he expressed was so much more than anything you and I are ever asked to do. But at the core of it was him taking an interest in us. It was the creator taking an interest in the creation. It was the king taking an interest in the servants and going so far as to become one. And this is remarkable. And Paul starts to equate Jesus' attitude with his humility. And attitude is kind of the way we think about or view other people, someone or something else. That's kind of our attitude, and it results in our behavior. And he says, listen, the attitude of Jesus is in how he looked at you and how he viewed you. Now, make no mistake, we tend to think of Jesus as our homeboy, and we should. He's our friend, and he's our closest counselor, and all of those kinds of things. But he is the King of Kings. And I want to talk a minute about pecking order and privileges, because the higher you get in any pecking order, the more privileges you have. This is why there's such a thing as the corporate ladder. And the reason that you probably chase the next kind of higher up position in the company that you work for is because it comes with a certain amount of privileges, starting with more pay. That's a privilege that the managers get that those on the team that they're managing don't. It comes with maybe a better office that has a window. It comes with a technology budget, so you're not paying for it out of your own pocket. Maybe an expense account to take people out to lunch. You might get a company car the higher up you go. Those are all privileges that we go, we recognize someone as important because they have them. And we want them, so we're going to pursue them. So here's what's so interesting to think about. Jesus, being the King of Kings, had all the privileges. All of them. He's at the top of the heap. When the disciples asked him, who's the greatest in the kingdom of God? He had every right to go, me. I'm the greatest. It's my kingdom. And yet, his attitude was something so different. He sits at the top of the heap, but his attitude was focused on the bottom of the heap. Notice Paul didn't say Jesus was the king and he became kind of middle of the road. He says Jesus was the king and he took on the role of a servant. He washed his disciples' feet. This is a king unlike any other kings, which is why we sing that song, by the way. What kind of king does that? What kind of king has that attitude? Most kings are, you serve me, you do for me. By the way, if you are a child, I know we're all children to some degree, but if you are a younger child right now, I just want you to know something about your parents. We like being your boss. There's privileges that come with being mom and dad. Like when I don't want to walk the dog, guess who gets to? When I don't want to put away the dishes in the dishwasher, guess who gets that privilege? Right? Like that's part of it. When you're at the top of the heap and you have privileges, you get to hand them out to other people. And so it would have been well within Jesus' rights to come and say, I'm the king, you're not, you die on a cross. I'm the king, you're not, you wash feet. But that was not Jesus' attitude. He was so interested in you and me that he came down to our level, at least from an attitude perspective. Because that's one of the things too, is sometimes we get mixed up and Jesus was born, so we think it was like a reset on his existence, or the start of his existence sometimes. But remember, John and Peter and James and all those guys would say, no, Jesus was there at the beginning. He put all this into motion and created all of this. So Jesus wasn't born with the humility. He had to choose the humility because he existed before his birth. It's in the words that Paul says. This is what he says. Jesus, he gave up his divine rights. He took on the role of a servant. He humbled himself. Jesus made a choice. If he is our example of humility, make no mistake, he chose humility. He chose to see you and me as more important, get this, as more important than him. That's why he came and he did what he did. That's why it was him on the cross and not me. Him on the cross and not you. Him washing feet and not Peter or John or any of those boys. Understand, humility is choice, not chance. It doesn't just happen. We've been talking about this now for a month. And my guess is you've done like I've done, and I've gone home and I've gone, God, make me more humble. It's the same like where we started. Hit me with it, God. I just love to be humble now. And sometimes I think God goes, do you really? Like, what is the humility about? That's the first question. But I think sometimes God goes, okay, get moving then. You want to be humble, make the choice to be humble. Don't just wait for me to show up and do it and flip the switch and make it right. Don't roll dice and say, well, maybe today is the day that I'll be humble. You have to wake up like Jesus woke up and go, today I will be humble. I will serve. Remember what Jesus said. He didn't say, I'm the greatest. He said, the greatest in the kingdom is the servant in the kingdom. The first will be last. It's this upside down view of everyone. You have to choose it. And that's what makes it hard. Because it's not your natural way. It's not mine. I'm not naturally humble. I'm not born with it. I have to choose it. This next part that Paul writes in his letter, I think is so amazing. And I'm going to read it without taking a breath because it's a very long sentence. And what's so cool in the English translation, there's no punctuation until the period. It is this long description of the result of Jesus' humility. And in some ways serves as the title of the humble servant king. This is what Paul writes. I love this. Therefore, God elevated him to the place of highest honor and gave him the name above all other names, that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue declare that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of God the Father. Notice that it said God elevated. And again, the dynamics of God's personhood is just so complex and crazy. But God elevated Jesus, which again serves as an example. We are always trying to elevate ourselves. Jesus did not elevate himself. He was elevated. He chose humility, was elevated as a result. And the result of that is that ultimately his name was put above all other names. So there's Jesus, and then there's everybody else. Which means the most important, world-changing, influential people that have ever existed at best would get to be number 2. At best. It also means that your name will never be at the top. It'll always be his name. Whether you like that or not, whether you choose that or not, his name is number 1. His name is the one in lights. Now here's why this is so important. Jesus gives us the example of humility, and then he structures his kingdom in such a way where we can take a posture of humility given the reality. Here's what I mean. If Jesus' name is at top and we know our name will never be at top, then in some ways humility is built in. You are subservient or subject to the name at the top. That name begins to define all of the other names. It's like the title of a list. In your phone, you have all of these lists that you've made, shows I want to watch, songs I want to listen to, names we might give our children, all of these kinds of things, and they have a thing up at top. That's the definition. At the top of all names that have ever been is Jesus. And he's the definition of what perfect, good humanity looks like. So it's built in that you and I have to recognize it's not us. But ultimately, we have to choose to live under that name. We have to choose to accept it. That's why I say humility is choice, not chance. It's not going to just happen. We have to wake up every day and go, it's not my name on the marquee. Which means, by the way, too, any other name, your neighbor, your spouse, your sibling, your classmate, your coworker, your neighbor. All the other names, which means you're not even any better than them because you're at best number 2 as well. It's a playing field leveler. And I find peace in that. I actually find relief in that. For some of you sitting here, you're like, dude, you just got a little preachy, you got like a little intense in here. I want you to know why, because this understanding has given me some relief to kind of take a deep breath. It's brought back to mind the voice of my children when I've tried to play basketball again, or video games or whatever the case may be, where they say, Dad, you're not that guy, bro. You're not that guy. And I'm okay with that now. Like, there's some relief. They are not expecting me to be Michael Jordan because they know that I'm not that guy. And they're not expecting me to be the world's greatest video game player because I never play. I'm not that guy. Whew. It's good to not be that guy. It's good to not have that pressure. There's some relief in that. I don't have to prove myself because I'm never going to be able to get to that place. So I'm not that guy. That is a deep breath. And when I go out to lunch with friends or family or people from church or whoever, and I'm sitting with them, I can go, I'm not that guy. I'm not better than you. Because all our names are under the name. All of them. You know, people call me weird things like pastor and reverend and father and all of these. Usually people that from Catholic background will refer to me as father, and that's super weird. My kids don't even call me father, but as if I'm ahead somewhere. Trust me, I'm not. Have you met me? Like, we're all under that name. I've gotten to the place where I'm okay humbling myself, going, I'm not that guy. I'm not Jesus. And that has changed fundamentally how I relate to other people. It allows me to take an interest in them because I'm not so impressed with me anymore. So I want to give you a couple kind of rules of thumb that I think will help. The way I think about this is they help me get into the posture of Jesus. And by posture, I just mean kind of how he positioned himself in relationship to other people. He wasn't going to be selfish. He wasn't going to try and impress others. He was just going to be there for them. So whether it's the woman at the well or Peter on the beach or any of these people, I think one of the things that Jesus did so great was he showed other people that he loved them, was almost impressed by them, and had a real interest in them. So these are just kind of rules of thumb that I've been living by. If they're helpful, awesome. If not, just forget about them. But rule number one, ask them about them before you tell them about you. Like, make it a rule when we sit down over lunch, I'm not gonna tell them about me until I learn something about them. And you just ask questions. So instead of sitting down and going, you're never gonna believe what happened to me this weekend, you go, how was your weekend? You do anything fun? And then let them answer the question fully. And odds are they're gonna end that answer with, how was your weekend? And now you share. But it's just this moment, this decision where I go, I'm going to be impressed by them and interested in them. I'm gonna take on a different attitude around them. I'm gonna ask before I tell. Second thing is find ways to give before you take. Right away, everybody's like, oh, you're telling me I gotta help my friend move. Yeah, in part. That's part of it. I think before you ask them to help you move, you should maybe help them move, right? And I'm not trying to get you into the whole thing my parents did when I was a kid, well, I guess we gotta have them over now because they had us over. It's not like that. But I think the more we kind of tell ourselves, I'm going to be looking for ways to give to them before I ask anything of them. By the way, this informs how we look at volunteering here at Great Lakes. We don't look at it as we're getting something from our volunteers. We hope we're giving something to our volunteers. That it is an opportunity to be more like Jesus and that it's transformation instead of transaction, not just a warm body. We want it to be something we're giving our volunteers. And I think this is how we should live as people. What can I give to my friends? What can I give to my coworkers? What can I give to my family before I go to them and ask for something? And it's not that we should never ask. It's just we're gonna order things in such a way where we're humbling ourselves and we're viewing them as better than us. Not that we don't have self-worth, but they're better than us. And we're gonna be interested in what they need before we share what we need. And then the last thing is try to admire before you try to astonish. Find something in them to celebrate. Find something that they have done or a way that they are or something they have said where you can go, that was awesome. And you might even just bring it up on your own, be like, hey, before we say anything else, I've noticed this about you. Or before we say anything else, I just want you to I want to tell you something I appreciate about you. You watch what that does to the rest of the conversation. If you can find a way to do what Jesus did for you, I mean, Jesus said, I love you so much, and you are worth it so much, I'll die on the cross. If you can do something like that for somebody else, it changes the whole dynamic. And they're gonna lean in, and you'll lean in, and the relationship, I promise, will be better. Instead of you trying to impress them, you find a way to be impressed by them. Because here's the deal. Humble doesn't just happen. You can't just roll the dice. You and I can't continue to do things the way we've always done things and hope that someone will magically interpret that as humility like Jesus. Jesus chose it. We have to choose it. We have to kind of restructure how we do things so that we can be more like him in the way that we view others, in the way that we engage with others. The band's gonna come out in a second and lead us in one more song together. I love this song so much that we sang it last week, and I asked that we sing it again because the words to it are so important. And this idea that humility is choice, not chance. To me, the words of this song speak to that. The words of this song speak to the idea of there's the name and all of our names under it. The main line is, you can have it all. You, Jesus, at the top of the heap, you can have all of it. All of my accomplishments, all of my selfishness, all of my desire to impress other people, all of the things that I think make me me and make me good and all that, you can have that all. And what's so cool is then God turns around and says, okay, now I want you to give that to them. I want you to do that for them. If you're giving it to me, I'm telling you, I want you to give it to them. There's this hand-in-glove relationship between loving God and loving other people. And so often he's gonna say, give it all. So my hope is that you'll use the next few minutes to kind of get your heart into the posture of submission to the name above all names that gave us the example of humility, because he gave it all for you and for me. So will you stand, and we'll use these next couple minutes to prepare for the week ahead. Let's sing.
Show me what it means to trust your heart. If I'm waiting for the perfect moment, and there's never been a better time to start, you can have it all. You can have it all. You can You can have it all. You can have it all. It's not that hard. It's not that complicated to trust in your heart. And that is the invitation. So I'm letting go now. I know that I won't regret it. I'm laying it down. It's all on the altar waiting. It's all on the altar waiting. It's not that hard. It's not that complicated to trust in your heart. And that is the invitation. So I'm letting go now. I know that I won't regret it. I'm laying it down. It's all on the altar waiting. You can have it all. You can have it all. Lord, you can have it Lord, you can have it
Heavenly Father, all is a lot. It's everything. Our jobs, our families, our money, our reputation, our accomplishments, our pride, our energy, our talents, our everything, our name. You can have it all. We humble ourselves. We put gladly our name under yours. We choose to follow you. We choose to follow in your footsteps where you took interest in us. You gave before we could give anything back. So we will do the same. But here's the deal. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be counter to our nature. So we will need your help. However that works, we will need it. We will need you to guide us, to show us, to remind us, to empower us, so that we can be like you every day of our lives. Help us. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks so much for letting us be part of your Sunday. We can't wait to have you back next time. We'll see you then.